This is a compendium that foreshadows each of the Fatui harbingers. When this piece of information first came out, players and lore enthusiasts all across the community started speculating which harbinger corresponds to which. Many have made inferences based on archetypes, symbolism, and their possible plot connections. But what if I tell you that these symbols are far ahead of any one of us, that it holds vastly available information that even the Irminsul wasn't able to record? What if I tell you that these symbols hide most of the crucial clues that open up to places and people we haven't known, as well as the unfolding of the rest of Genshin Impact's story? Well, Denalists, prepare your delusions because the court is now in session. The Natlan Archon quest has been long done, and we have already garnered more pieces to the puzzle that might just complete a lot of our existing lore questions. We confirmed the dottore and Wanderer's theory about the fake sky, we were made known about the connection the Wyob and the Lord of the Night have with the Seelie, and at last, we were also let in regarding the Traveler's ancient name, being Tumaini. But just as we found answers, we were also left with similarly doubting questions, like, is the captain really dead? I mean, I can understand the logic behind it. He's not moving, he blatantly sacrificed himself as a trade-off to spare Mavuika's life, and he entombed himself in ice to make the surrounding area his burial grounds. But my lore senses are tingling when people label Capitano as dead. I really think there is more to his current state than just ceasing existence. Call it cope or not, but are you really gonna settle with how the first Harbinger's lore was expounded? I'm not complaining, but I think labeling his current state as death is somewhat lore contradictory. If you look at the rest of the Harbingers we've known so far, almost all of them still has a recurring role in the overall unfolding of the story, aside from their respective Archon quests where they are involved. You have Arlecchino, who is still currently presiding the House of the Hearth alongside Childe, who both have current involvement in Project Stucha. Then you have Wanderer, yes, I still count him as part of the Harbingers, who has an important role to play as a parallel to Durin. We have dottore, who's been long familiar to us, and speaking of which, eyes are all over him since he could be the next big Harbinger as we head to Notcry. And now that I mentioned it, he also led the heist of the ancient moon fragments from Natlan for his own research. Who knows what he's actually into with all these bizarre and disturbing experiments he's conducting? Other Harbingers mentioned also have ongoing operations and involvement in some quests, such as Pantalone and Sandrone. The Fatui seems to be an active organization all throughout the region, and it's giving off that vibe that the Tsaritsa's been fully orchestrating the operations that are happening. That's why declaring Capitano as dead to me feels very lackluster, because that would make it seem as if the Tsaritsa didn't mind losing one of her biggest Harbingers in her grand plan. My bet is that she permitted Capitano to relinquish his duty because whatever Capitano planned with the sacrifice might actually end up being a blessing in disguise for the Tsaritsa's plans. But what about Signora? Oh, yeah, she's actually been dead, so technically our argument has already been gone for naught? Not if we go back to the Winter Night's Lotso trailer. The thing is, the trailer showed us that Signora's death was a big deal for them. As opposed to the captain, Signora's death was less likely planned and was more likely to be abrupt. This of course was shocking for the Fatui, so much that their mourning ended up being a grand assembly. However, in it, we can shift our attention to what Piero said at the end.
Now you rest in this coffin, encased in layer upon layer of ice. But Rosaline, I promise you, your final resting place will be the entirety of the old world.
So even if she is technically dead, she still has a role to play for the overall plot, specifically in regards to the old world. And in that trailer, moths were shown as its repeating imagery, highlighting its focus on the death of La Signora. If Capitano is dead, then we could have gotten a Winter Night's Lotso Season 2. But even if we are speaking from a promotional or lore standpoint, doing so would be extremely nonsense and impossible even. If we tried to use the same usage of imagery with La Signora being represented by moths, we would end up incorporating nails as imagery, since that represents Capitano in the Fatui Harbinger's Compendium. But knowing Genshin Impact, nails wouldn't be something you could just casually throw in for Fatui use without properly involving the heavenly principles, and so that got me intrigued even more in regards to the Compendium symbols themselves. Like, what's the deal with these symbols and how can we determine which Harbinger is which among these logos? Get get your delusions up and running because we will have these Fatui Harbinger symbols demystified. To start with, we already have 3 Fatui symbols that are confirmed by their respective symbols. We have Child, symbolized by the narwhal, Wanderer, or formerly known as scaramouche, symbolized by a childlike figure with a heart, and Arlecchino, symbolized by a clawed grip that overshadows some sort of a candle. What confirms these is the fact that these symbols are literally their constellations, and just like any other character constellation, theirs are also named accordingly to their respective stories. Child's Monoceros Kylie means Narwhal of the Sky, which is a direct reference to his whale attack during his boss fight, which in return also references his connection to Skirk through his foul legacy. This also nudged at his encounter with the all-devouring narwhal that caused the prophecy to happen in Fontaine. Arlecchino's Ignis Purgatorius means cleansing fire, a symbolic reference to her restructuring of the House of the Hearth system and her releasing Clervy from the house, fulfilling her dream and sending her off from her seemingly inescapable nightmare. Visually, this symbol also hinted at the curse that she possessed, a strange fire that leaves blackened marks throughout her body, a process of change in which after images blended with these marks, a subtle reference to her idol animation. Then we have Wanderer, whose constellation is Peregrinus, meaning wanderer. This is somehow weird because while the symbol of the childlike figure with a heart is on point from the compendium to the constellation, the context of him being a wanderer has some differences to settle. When he was still identified as Scaramouche, we initially knew him to be a discarded prototype by the Raiden Shogun, who was then took in by Katsuragi and gave him a home in the Tarasuna. Unfortunately, he didn't last long before being cast out, only to have his last human hope shattered when the only friend he has that is left eventually fell to his mortality. This is him being a wanderer out of not having any roots to settle in, which seems to agree with the current character of Wanderer now until we remember that Nahida took him in to be fully reintegrated in Sumeru with his new identity. Contextually, this would make sense as Peregrinus referring to 2 possible interpretations of Wanderer. 1 being his moving from place to place in search of a heart, and 2 being his integrated identity with respect to the life of his previous one. This is confusing if you think that his symbol is supposed to point to a cohesive story with a unifying context. But if we go back to the inversion of Genesis story quest where he erased his former identities from Irminsul to gain a new identity and vision, it gave us clue upon knowing that part of the quest has him retaining his previous life memories. Remember that I said that character constellations correspond to their specific stories? It turns out that these constellations are mapped destinies provided by their visions, although with some exceptions. When you do character story quests, their titles are often the same as their respective constellations. These are the mapped destinies in play. Hence, you also see the original Archons have a separate story quest that is titled by their constellation name, despite their vast relevance in the overall lore of the game. But what about the exceptions I mentioned, like the ones who have constellations but don't possess visions, like the Traveler and Neuvillette? Not to mention the other non-original Archons that have constellations but also don't possess those tangible visions. It just so happens that these cases really are exceptions. You know, like how the Raiden Shogun labeled the Traveler when they first met in the Inazuma Archon quest.
You are an exception, it appears. Exceptions, the enemy of eternity.
And if we want to understand the Peregrinus constellation, we need to look through these exceptions to see the way in which the context would eventually converge. For the Traveler, their constellations are self-referential with Viator and Viatrice for Ether and Lumina respectively. Same goes with Neuvillette with Leviathan Judicator, and it is a crucial detail that his constellation name needed no translation. This implies that the cases of the Traveler and Neuvillette are unadulterated. They are original in a sense, verifiable to the point that we can identify Ether or Lumine as the Traveler Descender and Neuvillette as the Dragon Ruler with utmost certainty. Their destinies inherently belong to them. They are their own god. They are the captains of their own ship. But then for the non-original Archons, their constellation names happen to be quite cryptic as opposed to the original Archons, who we could tell due to their constellation names possessing the Latin word day, which could highlight influences related to the heavenly principles. Perhaps this is due to the special circumstances circumstances that had to cross with their eventual archonhood, like Raiden Shogun with Shadow Empress, Nahida with Wisdom of Ahura Mazda, and Mavuika with Unconquered Sun. But if we analyze the hidden implications of these terms, it would end up making a lot of sense through the lore and the Archon quest. Like in the case of the Raiden Shogun, or in this case Raiden A, she was known to be the twin sister of Makoto, who at the time was the Baal referenced by Zhongli. When Makoto fell under the events of the Cataclysm, this caused heavy devastation to A, further hampering her transition to Archonhood, which then caused her radical approach to ruling Inazuma, because back then she is known for her martial prowess. And in her story quest Act 2, the difficult transition was further addressed by Makoto, in which she apologized for not being able to persuade A away from her obsession over the pursuit of stillness, which is why she was lent the support of Istaroth to plant the sacred Sakura seed. It is in order to grow parallel to A's real transition to Archonhood, as she bids farewell to Makoto for the last time, allowing her to step into the light of her duty instead of being stuck in the shadow of her predecessor, hence Shadow Empress. Then we have Nahida, who was in captivity in the sanctuary of Surasthana for 500 years following the death of Greater Lord Rukkhadevata, which memories about her became the source of the withering. Rukkhadevata left a legacy with the people of Sumeru through the Akasha Terminal as a core method of attaining knowledge. However, this failed to consider the threat of forbidden knowledge. The sages couldn't accept the loss of their deity, much so being replaced by the smaller lesser Lord Kusanali, and so they rejected her and imprisoned her before she could even take charge, further leaving the crisis unchecked. Divine knowledge capsules started circulating around, causing more strife and madness to permeate the region, and it could only be resolved through the conundrum Rukkhadevata left for Nahida to solve: World Forget Me. And so the events of the Sumeru Archon quest followed, which eventually led to a bittersweet farewell cutscene where Nahida and Rukkhadevata had an exchange of impartations, where Rukkhadevata used the dreams of the people to fight off the forbidden knowledge, only for her plan to be suddenly cut to a halt. There goes Nahida with her own wisdom and mastery over dreams. This was a striking contrast to the sages, foreshadowed by the Travail trailer. Wisdom is the enemy of wisdom itself. Nahida is the wisdom that the wise needed, but have been rejecting, hence Wisdom of Ahura Mazda. Ahura Mazda being the Zoroastrian deity whose name literally translates to Lord and Wisdom. And lastly, we have Mavuika, the current-seated Archon for Natlan, the one whose life is supposed to be sacrificed as per Renova's rule if it weren't for Capitano's grudges against the Divine. Natlan has been in close quarters with the Abyss, having been fighting wars against the invasion while having to watch over the Night Kingdom under continuous threat of these destructive entities. While there have been many Archons in the history of Natlan, it was Mavuika who came up with a 500-year plan, a plan that she envisioned where the nation would eventually triumph against the Abyss with a war to end all wars. Sun is a recurring symbol for Natlan, and it can even be seen with the nation's main logo. Calling something or someone unconquered implies that the subject is of great resolve, able to withstand pressure all while staying true to sound judgment, a perfect description to Mavuika's character. When she and Capitano had a clash of approaches and ideas, she never backed down, knowing that on behalf of her people, it's already been decided that it will be the land of Natlan itself that will fight back with all its history passed down from generation to generation, as opposed to Capitano's plan, which, alongside his compliance to the Tsaritsa's aim, stems from his personal fears with the Abyss in relation to his experiences back in Conria. Mavuika is the representation of everyone in Natlan, as well as its history. Natlan is the sun, with Mavuika being a part of the history of Archons that presided the land. The moment they turned the tides around during Act 4 was the moment Natlan, through their Archon, stands unconquered just as she planned, hence Unconquered Sun. From these three Archon narratives, we can find that their constellation imprints are intertwined with the lore that surrounds their respective nations and predecessors. While it works similarly as a map destiny just like other vision bearers, theirs work in reference, implying that their map destiny is a reference or continuation of pre-existing destinies that eventually had to intersect at an eventual point. This is the missing link that will connect the two contexts surrounding Wanderer's Peregrinus constellation and his symbol in the Fatui Harbinger's Compendium. He received a vision that embedded that constellation the moment he accepted his memories and claimed it as part of him. While he exists as a separate entity by the name of Wanderer, his destiny was mapped in reference to what already existed in his memories, the destiny that used to belong belonged to his previous incarnation, Scaramouche. Needless to say, this turn of events has already been foreshadowed and sketched by his Fatui symbol, leading us to conclude that the symbols in this compendium mirrors each of the Harbinger's personal destinies, alongside the multitude of possibilities of intertwining destinies that would eventually refer back to these symbols. It's like saying that even though constellations are mapped by the gods through the visions they bestow, it is not only the gods that have control over the stars. Just like Neuvillette and the Travelers, who are masters of their own destiny, the Fatui might have also possessed the ability to forge their own destinies and record it in a self-referential way. And considering that one of the main gimmicks of the Fatui and Snezhnaya is their own manufactured delusions, it just raised the possibility that they are capable of creating fake constellations. Constellations that are rooted from human arrogation, from the virtue of folly that they ever revere to mock the gods with. If that case holds true with how Childe, Arlecchino, and Wanderer's constellations are self-referenced through the game's story development, then we could make use of this information to find missing puzzle pieces of the lore and even predict possible future connections that the game hasn't subtly revealed yet. As we continue looking through the rest of the symbols, the next two harbingers that are worth discussing are Signora, who is represented by the moth, and Capitano, who is represented by the three nails. We have discussed a while ago that even though Signora's death is already final, this wouldn't mean that her symbol holds no relevance anymore. In fact, I believe that even in her death, Signora still remains as a crucial character with a role to play in the future of the game's story. The old world would probably end up being an important concept or location in-game, for Snezhnaya to be specific. This would probably hold the same importance as the Night Kingdom to Natlan or Enkanomiya to Inazuma. We even have an item that foreshadows this strongly. Among the character ascension materials, these gemstones have always been of lore interest, since they mirror the ideals and even the role of the respective elemental Archon in the story. In the Cryo gemstone, we are taken into the perspective of the Tsaritsa, with her seemingly inclusive goal of burning away the old world. If we consider the symbolic associations of moths, we get themes of transformation, struggles, love, death, and the afterlife. There is also a known knowledge that moths are the spirits of the dead who are trying to visit their loved ones. Not to mention a fun fact that moths are attracted to the flames, which makes all of these moth symbolisms highly characteristic of Signora. Tying all of these to the canon events, the fact that it's very emphasized that not even ashes remain in her death, followed by the appearance of a red flaming moth in the Winter Night's Lazzo, give us the idea that Signora might show us the very essence of death and destruction that would prove to be key when the time comes that Genshin shines its lore light into the old world. It might occur as a memory or some leyline phenomenon, but one thing's for sure: her death by the Raiden Shogun's hands would not be what it all seems. And the fact that the Tsaritsa and the entire Harbinger faction mourned for her with subtle undertones of seething hatred towards the gods makes the old world a little bit more suspicious now. It's as if it points to the heavenly principle skeletons in their closet, a possible eternal realm of damnation where the destruction that the Crimson Witch of Flames could bring might as well be the point of salvation for those who remained in there. On the other hand, we have the community's most beloved Harbinger in Capitano, who is still in the crux of debate as to whether he's really dead or whether he's gonna end up being playable. Like I said a while ago, labeling his state as death doesn't really do it justice. Apart from that, it wouldn't make complete sense since Renova explicitly stated that the curse of immortality would remain. However, the symbolism of the three nails might have given away the full context as to what kind of state Capitano is in, and trust me, it's actually very obvious. In the final act of Natlan's Archon quest, it was revealed to us that Capitano's real name is Thrain. He originates from Conria, serving as commander, where after its fall, he gathered the remaining members of his platoon to Natlan. This was a nudge to that one scene in the Night Kingdom where he swore on leading his people to the destination he promised to them. Continuing his backstory, he also had a history accompanying the Masters of the Night Wind and befriending its chief that time. This explains why he was looking for Citlali, and is knowledgeable about the same techniques Auroran thought that is only exclusive to Citlali herself. We also get to know that Capitano's heart is modified to convert memories and souls into knowledge from the ley lines. We gotta put that emphasis on memories and souls because it would serve as focal supporting evidence in making sense of his three-nail symbol. Now, if we go back to the name Thrain, we discover that this is based based off of a character from the Icelandic legendary saga Hrumundar Saga Gripsunar. It also explains that Thrain in that saga is a draugr, a type of corporeal undead creature, exactly befitting of Capitano with the curse inflicted on him and the other Conrians such as Dainsleif. I actually like the specific usage of the word corporeal here because in the game, the story seems to really highlight the physical decay of those who suffer from the curse of immortality. This led me to believe that this emphasis might also serve as a strong reference for the three-nailed symbol, and it turns out that the likelihood is spot on. If we highlight Capitano's corporeality as well as the two words we emphasized a while ago, we end up with three aspects of Capitano to correspond with the number of the nails. These three aspects of Capitano would correspond to his body being corporeality, his mind being memories, and his spirit being soul. But you might ask, sure, you got the number 3, but what about the nails? Well, in Genshin, there could be no other possible connection to the nails other than the divine nails themselves. And we know that these divine nails are majorly responsible for most of the calamities that occurred in Teyvat. These nails also have history of being weaponized against the insurgency of the Dragon Sovereigns. These also have a unique altering property that cause unfathomable changes to the ley lines of the impacted area. And since they are used against forces that incite insurgency, it could be a valid reference to state that divine nails also fell onto Conria. With this possibility, we get our first nail correspondence, a nail in Conria that symbolizes Capitano's corporeality. For the other two, memories and souls, considering that these two correspond to the mind and spirit respectively, we already have leads that already point us to two tightly relevant points of interest. For the spirit, we have the Night Kingdom. It is arguably the most obvious spiritual place where the divine nails could be seen. In case you don't know, if you do the night trials and look up in that location, you will see a divine nail floating above. And the Night Kingdom is a little bit of a weird realm, but not at all for Natlan's context because we've been used to the previous region's state of ley lines. Natlan pretty much reinvented the relationship between elemental energies and humans through the Night Kingdom, ancient names, and phlogiston. But the fact that it's a recurring emphasis that Natlan's ley lines aren't as deep, the existence of the divine nails in the Night Kingdom might be what's responsible for the existence of the Night Kingdom itself in the first place. As a result, it could also be that the divine nails are majorly involved in the established rules for the region. And with the Wayab and the Lord of the Night's connection to angels and the Seelie, I believe that these divine nails had a similar effect to the Night Kingdom as with the disaster that happened to the Lunar Palace. Even though there weren't any disasters in the Night Kingdom apart from the corruption in the Abyss, it's very likely that Capitano sees the intricacies of the situation in relation to the ley lines. It could be why he initially resented Mavuika and dueled her for the Gnosis, with an intention to recreate the ley lines. He knew the secret of the ley lines and sought to destroy the rules because he knew something is off with the Night Kingdom. He took matters into his own hands and planned to lead his people there as their final repose. It could be that he also fought Mavuika for that same plan. He wanted the Night Kingdom to be fully restored, free from the rules and influence of the divine nails and the abyssal contamination. This is our second nail correspondence, a nail in the Night Kingdom that symbolizes the soul. And then we have the last nail, a nail that corresponds to the mind and the memories. For this, we need to revisit the other divine nails and how they influence their respective areas. There is one in Dragonspine, which used to have an Irminsul tree rooted on its formerly verdant vicinity of Salvindignir. It was transformed into the extremely cold climate we are familiar today after a ritualistic attempt to revive the princess of Salvindignir at the summit. This princess was blessed with foresight. She painted frescoes that depicted things that she foresaw until a day has come where she received a dream omen depicting a black dragon filling the land with a cloud of scarlet poison. This to me seemed to be the reason for the divine nail to fall onto Salvindignir. Then there is also one in the chasm, which is also known as the Spirit Stone. It's mainly known through the Perilous Trail Archon quest when the crew fell into a disoriented domain beneath it. It's apparently also chaotic, but it was revealed to have been monumental in preventing the onslaught of the Abyss while also having a major drawback of sealing the others who tried fighting the Abyss. Then there is one in Tsurumi Island, which is yet heavily implied because we could not see its physical appearance, but its presence caused the island to be enshrouded in fog and possess time-altering properties. Here, there's been a known entity that goes by the name Kanakapatir, and there has been history about the island that was well documented recounting that thousands of years ago, Kapatir noticed that some strange objects fell from the heavens and landed upon Tsurumi Island, producing the fog. It's also worth noting that Tsurumi Island's history was also divided into two civilizations. The first being the pre-Thunderbird civilization, which had people worshipping Celestia as documented in the island's underground ruins. Little were known about what had transpired until the Divine Nail's descent, apart from the murals which seemed to imply some valuable insights. Written among them transcribes, "Wisdom is hidden in the star fragments, here silently smoldering remains, heaven is not to be watched," and subscribe to Mercanique? Oh ho ho, I didn't know pre-Thunderbird civilization has a thing for lore deep dives, and if ever there is one thing they want to tell you all is that by subscribing to my channel, you could understand how they viewed Celestia and possibly how it ties to everything in Teyvat. Come on, don't be shy away from it. It's not like you're on the Primordial One's watch list for seeking forbidden knowledge. Yeah, good. This is only between you and me. But wisdom and heaven? Let's put them aside in the notes for now. We'll deal with this important stuff later. After the pre-Thunderbird civilization comes the Thunderbird civilization, which introduced a tribe who worshipped Capatier as their god, which lore was the focal point of the Tsurumi Island world quest. We know that this second civilization got wiped out thanks to Capatier's wrath when the tribe sacrificed Ru as offering. However, it's been long since Tsurumi Island was the center of discussion, yet I feel like something in its lore is misleading. You see, the entire gist of the world quest revolved around Ru and Capatier's relationship as loyal devout and a deity friend. After going through its entire trippy quest series, we were presented with the reality that Ru has been long gone, and Capatier was the same entity as the thunder manifestation that got manifested after she was formerly killed by A. Although we know that there was an extreme leyline disorder in Tsurumi Island, trying to link this back to the Divine Nail feels so far-fetched since it was implied that it only caused the fog and not the time alteration. That is, until we explore the nature of Capatier as a god connected to the electro element, and how she connects to Archon residue, to A, and to the ideal of eternity itself. If Capatier is truly considered a god, then it's highly plausible that her being killed by A would produce the same degree of outcome as the aftermath of the deaths of the gods who fought during the Archon War. This kind of aftermath resulted in the permeation of the Archon residue, which was known to be used by dottore to experiment on Childe. That caused her so much agony and hatred. A, being the assailant, also ties this closely to the long-standing Bale Thunder contamination in Musoljin Gorge when she sliced Orobashi. If we consider A's ideal of eternity as well as the involvement of Istaroth in the overall Inazuma storyline, then it is highly likely that the electro element has time-altering abilities, in a sense that whatever it touches either gets accelerated and amplified, as seen in its reactions, or whatever gets affected by electro becomes eternal. And with Capatier being an electro god, I believe that her being able to witness the Divine Nail descend and being killed off while she had her unresolved troubles all those years is the main cause of Tsurumi Island's extreme leyline disturbance. In short, it was through the Divine Nail that influenced her memories that caused such change in the leylines. And even if Capatier being an electro god with connections to time and eternity becomes a loose evidence, there is still one more area that is affected by a Divine Nail that strongly suggests time alteration. That area is none other than Mount Damavand and the Eternal Oasis. Originally, this was the same nail used against the Pep during their accumulation of forbidden knowledge, which resulted to the desertification of its impacted area. There is also a legend that tells us about King Deshret using the Divine Nail's power along with the power of the Jinn to create the Eternal Oasis as a cemetery for Nabu Malikata, the goddess of flowers. Looking at the Eternal Oasis, I can now confidently say that these theories are not all made up. These Divine Nails have time-altering properties, but apart from that, all of these share a common reason for their descents. The Spirit Stone prevented the Abyss to emerge to the surface. The Skyfrost Nail put a halt to the foresights of the Princess of Solvindignir. The nail in Mount Damavand was used against the Pep in their accumulation of forbidden knowledge, and the Tsurumi Island Nail implying its aftermath through the underground ruins, documenting inscribed words such as wisdom in heaven, and their murals all hinting towards divine knowledge, all of them tied together with the Abyss and forbidden knowledge. These nails descended because people people started knowing what they aren't supposed to know. All of them also involved withered Irminsul trees. And guess where it brings us? Back to the possibility of divine nails having descended onto Conria, and a clue in regards to the secrets hidden by Irminsul regarding the truth of Teyvat. These Irminsul trees hold so much influence over the ley lines all across Teyvat, and just like with Wanderer rewriting history in the memories of almost everyone by erasing his former self from Irminsul, the divine nails aim to correct the knowledge that has been presented, actively filtering out any memory that relates to the knowledge from beyond. This is our third nail correspondence, a nail for every Irminsul tree that sought to alter corrupted memories. Tying all of these connections together, we are now able to see through the captain's Fatui symbol. The three nails predicted his very sacrifice. By having an immortalized body, he is able to make a bargain with Vernova, allowing his soul to become a vessel for the Lord of the Night in order to rewrite the ley lines with the accumulated memories from his modified heart, preventing the Abyss from invading Natlan ever again. His sacrifice and what we could know more about the divine nails were information that have been with us. The Tsurita lifted him off of his duty because she recognized it as a canon part of her plan based off of Capitano's symbol. It could be that there won't be a Winter Nights Latsu Part 2 because Capitano isn't actually dead. In my opinion, there is a high likelihood that he will come back considering his direct influence over Natlan's ley lines, and him using the curse of immortality against the very same god that gave it to him. Such a cool comeback that even made me realize that not only is he the one benefiting from his eternal repose, but he's also benefiting Natlan and possibly even the entirety of Teyvat by sharing his life force and merging it with the ley lines. And by the time the Loom of Fate manages to exert full influence, it would then rid of the dormant condition that Capitano put himself in to supply the ley lines. At that moment, we might see him coming back on our side. Maybe this will happen in Conria's chapter, maybe it's something that the compendium can hint at, or maybe this is something that we can use to have the rest of the symbols demystified. The only show that hits the lore lights from symbolic foresights. I'm Mercanique, and this is my verdict. Thanks for watching. And if you want to find some deep dives regarding how even the smallest details such as colors can reveal a lot about Teyvat, check out my video over here where I bring up yet another harbinger to prove that Lali was right about the color red. Well then, stay curious, Denalists.